One thing before we get into, we're going to Exodus chapter 20, so you can go there. But while you're turning, one thing that God did in the last, I think about a month and a half, and I just didn't tell you all. Some of you know, but God gave Redeemer South a tremendous gift. They gave us a building, free and clear. Amazing, yes. It's Morning Star Baptist Church. Remember, they were wanting to come with Redeemer South, and they voted against it. But in the providence of God, they have closed their doors and handed over the property to us. It's just an amazing time. So, in one sense, they had a dream. And there are some people that are sore about that and heartbroken over that. But, in sorrow, then joy comes in the morning. I mean, there is a joy of a rebirth now because Redeemer South will occupy that building. So we're just thankful for what God has done. You can pray for those at Morning Star as they're trying to find a place to fellowship. We'd love it to be here, but they have to make those choices and decisions. But such an incredible gift from the Lord. And, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when we were first thinking about this and planning this, and then the money was given to plant the church, and then we launched it right after Easter, and then we get this beautiful gift. It's got to be, worth $750,000 is given to us. It's just amazing. Just amazing. It seems, so I'm glad to hear and have the affirmation from the Lord. Just like here you go. Keep doing it, I'm so thankful. Well, Exodus chapter 20. We're on the seventh commandment. Anyone know the seventh commandment? Another one of those easy topics. Okay, so to begin with, let me give you like an illustration. Imagine that you have created the perfect Adirondack patio chair that will make life more pleasant for all the people of Rockford. And you've made it for some of your friends, and they rave about it. It's just perfect. We love it. And you're with your friends at night, and you're talking about how great it is. And one of them said, you should go into business and create this Adirondack chair because it's just so perfect. People will buy it up like that. And you think about it, and you go, that's true. And so you take some months and you draw up the specifications. You get a manual to figure out how to put it together. You rent some space. You hire a production team and a small sales force, and you start at it, and it goes gangbusters. Everyone's buying these Adirondack chairs. They think it's the best Adirondack chair that they've ever had. And you can't even keep up with the sales, so you have to supply more of the production team. So you build the production team, and it's going crazy. And then problems started. The sales team heard that from customers that they wished for like a cup holder attachment on their Adirondack chair, And some customers wanted multicolored options, not just one. Others said they would buy more if the chairs were collapsible. From the production side, they said, they thought that the angle of the seat was too steep for comfort. And others had a problem with the supplier of teak wood because of the way they treated their employees. Others suggested that pine wood would be better so we could save the teak forests. And then there was talk about using plastic because then we wouldn't have to use wood at all, but then someone suggested, that's toxic, so we can't use plastic. So after some consideration, you decided, no, we're going to keep with the original design. That was our bread and butter. That thing sold like hotcakes, and everyone was grousing and grumbling, like, I can't believe that boss doesn't even listen to us. And they were frustrated. Even some management level people had a hard time with it. But finally, things died down. But there was a change happening. Without approval, the angles of the chairs were altered. Various colors started to be produced. And they started using pine wood in the construction. And what the company was manufacturing now was nothing like the original design. Well, the complaints were flooding in about the quality, and the sales were plunging. So you gather all the people together and you tell them how great the original design is, and we really want to get back to that because that will help put it back together again, and the company will be strong. So you say this and you dismiss them, and there they go. It gets better. Come on. It gets better. I know. But nothing changed. Worse, everybody's opinion was implemented. And the teams are starting to argue about whose idea was better. Fights break out on the production floor. And what used to be a happy company, a company creating Adirondack chairs, now is a war zone producing poor quality chairs. And the future of the company was doomed. Marriage comes with blueprints from God. And if we alter them, it will be to our own destruction. Do not commit adultery is the seventh commandment. And it's for our good. It's actually for the stability of society and for the glory of God. If you ask me, John, what's wrong with our world today? I probably would state it in this way. Once we moved off the gold standard of God's word and everybody did right in their own eyes, it became just opinions. We started to go down, but the thing that really has altered and been damaged the most is the family unit. Because when you alter that, it's going to destroy the culture. It's going to destroy society, and that's what you've seen. You know, with multiple marriages happening in a lifetime, adultery rampant, just people going outside the bounds of marriage and even before marriage, just not adhering to what God has designed. It's going to bring about so much pain and sorrow. It's hard to argue against thou shalt not commit adultery because generally we like loyalty in relationships. Adultery is a betrayal of loyalty with collateral damage to the home. The creator of marriage knows best. Marriage is called the grace of life by the Apostle Peter because he believes and the Lord believes that life is more enjoyable, more beneficial when you have someone with you. But you can't alter that design as so many people want to do. So let's start with the question, point number one, what's the purpose of marriage? We're talking about adultery. You can't really talk about adultery until you talk about marriage. So let's talk about marriage. What is the purpose of marriage? Well, let's not take a modern definition. Let's go way back. I'm going to go back to 1689, the Second London Baptist Confession of 1689. So it's like a doctrinal statement, okay? Here's what it said about marriage. Marriage was ordained for the mutual help of the husband and the wife, so for companionship, for the increase of humanity with legitimate offspring, for multiplication, and for the prevention of immorality. So let's talk about what's the purpose of marriage. Let's talk about the first one, companionship. Companionship. You know, remember back in Genesis chapter 2, Adam was alone. And he was naming the animals, and the animals were passing before him. And he realized, there's no one my equal. There's no one that I can talk to, walk with in the garden, enjoy a conversation with. There's no one like me. And so God created a perfect complement, woman. Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12, it says, 2 are better than 1. Because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift the other up. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. And I say amen to that. Companionship is one of the best things of life, because there's nothing better than to come home after working hard or a difficult day into the arms of someone else, or just have companionship, and then at the end of the day slip into bed, and then you get to sleep together. It's just like an amazing thing that God has given. It's a gift of companionship. But for us to stay together and for it to stay enjoyable, we have to work on the relationship, which means long, tedious conversations sometimes, self-sacrifice, humility, forgiveness. It's a worthy work, but it is work. So companionship, here's another one, procreation or multiplication. Genesis 1:28 says, "Be fruitful and multiply." These people who image forth me, God said, let's multiply that out in the world. It's the first commandment, but clearly it's meant to be obeyed in the bond of marriage. In order to make, and here's God's perfect, design. In order to make that bond tighter, in order to make the work of marriage a little bit more enjoyable, God made procreation enjoyable, very enjoyable, which is why there's a temptation for adultery. But again, the gift of sexual enjoyment was to be for the purpose of keeping marriages bound together. Genesis 2:24, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." Talking about that. So, companionship, procreation, thirdly, to display Christ's love to the world. To display Christ's love to the world. Ephesians 5:32, it says that, men and women come together in marriage, and that is to display Christ's love for the church. It's supposed to be a little drama that's played out for the world to see of what covenant love looks like. That's why we are to love our spouses in sickness and health, in richer for poorer, as long as we both shall live. That's covenant love. And that's what Christ does to us. His love never fails. It never gives up. It never gives up on me. That's the covenant love it's talking about. Think about all the religions of the world. The relationship with its God is based completely on your ability to perform well. If you don't perform well, you get discarded by that God. Gospel grace or gospel love is a covenant. It's not based upon what we do for God, but what Christ did. What Christ has done on the cross, taking the judgment we deserve. That's love. And that love sees us through difficult seasons of fear, doubt, lust, greed, anger. When we're not attractive, when we're not so lovely, Christ continues to love us. And Christian marriage is to show that kind of committed love to the world. It gives a little picture. When we're talking about the love of Christ, we get a picture of our marriage to them. Now, it's not perfect, and we have to work through a lot of sins because we're both sinners in marriage. But when we stick together and we work things through, it's a picture of what Christ does for the church. Now, one man, one woman, committed for a life together, which should only be broken with adultery. You shouldn't happen, but you know what I'm saying by that. The bond of marriage is only broken by adultery, death, or in some cases, abandonment. But other than that, it's to be lifelong. Adultery is a betrayal of covenant love in marriage, and God is serious about marriage. That's why in the Old Testament, It was capital punishment for adultery. I mean, you line it up, thou shalt not murder, capital punishment. Thou shalt not commit adultery, capital punishment, which tells you a little bit about the attitude God has toward divorce, adultery. Let that just rest upon you for a moment, because in a day and age when marriage vows are not seriously taken, you need to feel that. You need to sense that. Which means, married people, no flirting, no looking around, no fantasizing. That all has to go. You have to really protect your heart. More of that later. So we looked at the purpose for marriage. Second point. How important is sexual fulfillment in marriage? How important is that? Well, it's important because God thought it was important to put it in marriage, right? But it serves a greater purpose in marriage. It's to keep the union strong, and it's to encourage multiplication. It's not supposed to be the most important thing in your life. That's idolatry. If it becomes the most important thing, well, how do I know it's the most important thing? It's when idolatry says this: I can't live without it. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get it. That's idolatry. That's a destructive force. Because when you supersize sexual fulfillment, you make it more than the designer designed it to be. You set yourself up for failure, frustration, and the destruction of your marriage. There's an obsession in our world with newness, novelty, white-hot exhilaration in romance. Like, there's an obsession about that. But that can never continue. Just think with me. Anything new that you get, like a computer, a car, a new watch, new clothes, you're exhilarated by them for about a couple days and then it's over. So that cannot be the thing that motorizes and moves your life. That can't be the top thing, because bodies change, mood changes, seasons of life, stress happens, your health fails. Think about it this way. Food has flavor, which is very enjoyable, but the purpose for food is to keep you alive. Flavor is a benefit. Sex is to propagate the race. The enjoyment of that is a benefit. As Doug Wilson says, the one who seeks to serve the pleasure alone is like a man who thinks the purpose of farming is to get a suntan. But in this world, sex is so important. It's way out of proportion. Men will get into a relationship for sex, and women will give sex just to have the relationship. And both are just trying, because of their insecurities and desires. You know, they're trying to get what they want, but it destroys true love. That destroys true love because of our lusts. If sexual fulfillment becomes ultimate, the most important thing, that selfish pursuit of it will destroy intimacy in marriage, and perhaps will make you an adulterer. Men, you know how destructive that force is. You know, if you start to feed that force, lust, it will be a locomotive that will be hard to stop. So you have to be so careful not to stoke the fire. Or feelings. Listen, Proverbs 6:27, can a man carry fire next to his chest and his clothes not be burned? Or can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched? So it is he who goes to his neighbor's wife. None who touches her will go unpunished. He who commits adultery lacks sense. He who does it destroys himself. Just talk to anybody who's been divorced. They will tell you. They lost their marriage. They lost their kids' respect of them. And their wages are garnished. And some of those will never be changed their whole life. Now, you can be forgiven, but the consequences may stay on you the rest of your life. That's how serious it is. You just think of marriage, if you will, as a friendship. Friendship is the baseline, right? With the potential of romantic sizzle. But you have to work through a lot of pain, a lot of struggle, and get to the other side. And if you do that every time, your love grows. And as your love grows, so does the electricity in your romance. But you have to be committed to the hard work. Face toward each other. Let's work this through. Let's work it out. Let's get to the other side, even if we have to stay up late at night and we have to work through something that's just pulling our hair out, we still get to the other side. Committed to this. Because if you're not, guess what happens? Your relationship has like a pile of debris on it. And it'll take a long time to clear it out for you to have a real relationship. Why? Because you're not doing it on a regular basis. That's normal relationship, by the way. My wife and I, we've had to work through a lot of things, right? A lot of conversations late at night. But my wife and I have been married for 30 years. And it is the best thing. What I love even today. It was even yesterday, we were driving in my Jeep, reaching over and grabbing her hand. It's an amazing thing. And it doesn't have the same kind of feeling that I did the first time. Like, oh my gosh, I think she digs me. It's not that. It's better. It's deeper. Why? Because we share a lot of experiences together. And, now get to see our kids flourish or grandkids or, we get to the other side and we because we've done the hard work by the power of the Spirit. I don't want to say it's all us, right? The Lord has got to be at the center point. Otherwise, I don't want to repent. And I don't want to be humble. And I don't want to admit anything, right? God has to be at the center or we're never going to get together. So we looked at the importance or the purpose of marriage and whether or not sexual fulfillment is important in marriage. It is, but not everything. Thirdly, how can I safeguard against adultery? How can I safeguard against adultery? Now, adultery is it has to do with a marriage. But many of you who are single, if you're not fighting for sexual purity, now single, or contentment in your heart, it will be a destructive force when you do get married. So you understand the reason why we should safeguard. Adultery was a capital offense in the Old Testament. It tells something about God's attitude toward it, but also destroys the best part of life, your family. And I want the best for you. So here's how you would safeguard. And I've mentioned a few, and I'm sure there's a lot more, but here's some. Confess everything to one another. No secrets. Confess everything to one another. No secrets. Because more sin grows in secrecy. Because you got away with it means that you're going to be tempted again, like, it's no big deal because I did it before. You just keep compounding that. No secrets, get everything out. Yes, it'll be difficult, work it through, but you will have oneness if you confess everything to one another. No secrets. Here's another one. Remove the supply lines of lust. And what I mean by that is, there's pipelines coming in that dumping sewage into your heart. Lustful sewage. That you need to sever those supply lines. Peep shows, brothels used to be in the shady part of town. And if anybody wanted pornography, well, it was behind the cashier's desk in a rack, and you'd have to ask for it with a line waiting to have their groceries, counted for. So it was embarrassing. No one wanted it. Few people had, guts to do that. Not anymore. Now pornography is like accessible without anybody knowing it. So in a group like, even as large as this, there's a large percentage of people, even this group, walking around smoldering with lust. I mean, white hot. You don't think that's destructive to your relationships? It is. It is. If you keep stoking the fire, it's going to burn everything down. How serious are you about safeguarding your soul? Some of you are sorry, but you do nothing to cut the supply lines off. Nothing. Think about what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, 27 and following. You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. That's our passage, right? Jesus says, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than your whole body be thrown into hell. Whoa. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, throw it away. For it's better that you would lose one of your members, that your whole body go into hell. Jesus is pretty serious about this. Is your fight against lust as serious as Jesus describes here? Or do you excuse it as no big deal because everybody is doing it? Because the passion of the flesh, unaddressed, wages war against the soul, says the Apostle Peter in chapter 2. You single person? That's why lust has to be put to death. You don't give it any oxygen. You don't give it any supplies. You don't keep the sewage pumping into your soul. You don't do that. It's like wages war against your soul. So think about like a big wall toward your soul. And this big tank is shooting its explosives into that wall, into that wall, into that wall. Well, it's, if you keep it up, it's going to ruin everything. It wages war against your soul. Remember what Proverbs 4:23 says, watch over your soul with all diligence, for out of it flows the springs of life. It wages war against that. You cannot just say, well, no one knows, it's just in my mind, I'm not hurting anybody. False. You are destroying your soul. This is where people complain of legalism, because they can't imagine not going to see a blockbuster movie. And they can't imagine taking an app off of their phone. And they can't imagine putting aside steamy romance novels. And they can't imagine curbing any freedom in their life. But isn't Matthew 5 implying such measures? To save your soul from hell? I think so. Whatever it takes. Is that the kind of war that you have toward lust? That's what Jesus is wanting. How about another one? Think twice about what you wear. Now, I know I'm making everybody uncomfortable at this moment. What is he going to say? Well, let me give you a principle to think through. That's the best way to do it. No lists, just a principle. The Proverbs say this in chapter 7, verse 10, talks about clothing associated with prostitutes. Now, I don't want you to think long about that, but there is a clothing that you go, okay, that's a prostitute. It's just recognizable. And you just think, what would that be? Because being fashionable isn't evil. And fashion draws the eye, but the question is this, what are you drawing the eye to? What are you trying to highlight? And are you attracting the wrong person for the wrong reasons? Again, gals, you don't want to toy with that. Now hear me. I'm not putting the blame of lust upon you. Primarily, that's guys who are beastly in their desires and need to be put in check. And that way, you can wear whatever you want, and they're still going to be beasts. And they have the responsibility to check their heart and to cut the supply lines off of lust. But you do have a part to play as a Christian woman. And I would just think about that. Fathers, you know what brings, a lustful thought in another guy. You could help your daughters. Don't just go, I don't know, let them decide. No, get involved. Husbands, fathers, get involved. Here's another one. Stop flirting. You're married. Okay? Some of you work with people that you can't change that. But you got to be very careful that there are professional boundaries put in place so that you don't get really comfortable, overly playful with someone who's not your spouse. That is a no-no. Because the more comfortable you become, the more you talk about things that will really endear yourself to each other. No flirting. You are married. Keep professional boundaries. Here's another one. And now these are the positives. Those are all the negatives. Here's the positive. Because once you get rid of those, what do you fill it with? Intensify godly desire through Bible intake, meditation, and prayer. That's not a gimme. I'm not just throwing a bunch of Christian nonsense in there or slogans. That is so important. You're going to war. You're going to war. You're trying to take something out, but you've got to feed your soul. With guys, you understand this? When you're lusting, you're just replaying it over and over and over, and then you add some more information over and over and over again, so now you're at a fever pitch. Well, you got to do the same thing with the glory of Jesus. You do that through the scriptures. You do that by thinking about it a little bit more. You do that by punching it down deep in prayer. All of that is to stir godly affections so that the desires of your heart match God. He becomes what you are longing for. That's not going to happen if you're not meditating on it like you do lust. Same principle, but think about the glory of Christ. Some of you, I don't know how you even operate without getting into the Word every day. Every day. You're in a battle, aren't you? Every day. So get in the Word every day and start meditating upon it and praying it into your soul. Pray and praise the glory of God. You see the love of Christ. We talked about the love of Christ. Well, then praise the love of Christ and think about it long enough. That with all our messed up, ways, He still loves us. You could think about that a long time. Those are the ways that you get stirred up. You can sing, read, pray, sing. We've talked about that. How about one more? I'm going to add one. Not in my notes. 30 minutes a day talking to each other. Turn off your phone, off your computer. Don't watch TV. You at least have to have 30 minutes of just talk time. If you want to build up a marriage, it takes time to do that. But if you guys are adrenaline filled, go, and you have things you're clicking off, well, that's great. You're productive. You're industrious. Yay. But you're going to have to safeguard the marriage. You need time when you're just the two of you. Not once a month you go out for a date. That's great. I would prefer once a week, but how about 30 minutes just of talking? You say, I don't even know how to do that. Well, guys, get thinking about question. Ask her a question. Hey, how'd your day go? Oh, we did this and that. Well, tell me about that more. And what did you guys talk about? And what do you think about that? Just keep the questions going. And you'll have a good conversation. Actually, you'll start to enjoy the conversation. And she might ask something about your day. But you need that kind of interaction. She doesn't need to know about your boring work or whatever. I mean, but you got to, maybe it's exciting, but you talk about some things that are of interest to you. Again, you dated at one time. You figured out something to talk about. You can do it again. Lastly, verbally build up your spouse. It's amazing to me. It's actually sad when you see couples just bickering all the time. And you don't think that that's battery acid on your relationship? Certainly you don't like that, and you're going to be far more tempted outside the bonds of marriage if you're not speaking build-up words into each other. You should be doing that daily. You should be saying something daily to your spouse. Not these cutting remarks and sarcastic jabs. You know what sarcastic jabs are? That's a coward's way of having a harder conversation. Something annoys you, and you should probably stop and have the conversation in a kind and fair way. But because you don't, you just kind of jab. That's going to destroy your relationship. You can't do that. Fight fair. Fight fair. Actually, have the conversation in a fair way and give grace. But you're pumping them. You're saying something. Thank you, or man, I really appreciate, and maybe it's really difficult to find some things, but you can. I know you can. Because you don't want someone nagging you all day, bickering and torpedoing every great idea that you have. If that continues to happen, you don't like the relationship. You're tolerating the relationship. So you change. Don't point to the other person. You change, because that's the only thing you have in your possession, right? You change. Start speaking good, encouraging words, building up your spouse. God created sexual desire to encourage oneness in marriage, to propagate the propagation of children, and it's an exquisite gift. But when you make sexual fulfillment the ultimate pursuit, you run the risk of destroying everything, the best of human experience, your marriage. Passion can so blind you that you betray your God and your spouse. Adultery is a wrecking ball. And some of the consequences will never be regained, but you can gain forgiveness with God. Because it always starts back. There's a lot of things that we can't change in this world, or maybe sins that we have committed. But we can come back to the very nucleus of life, and that's our relationship with God. And He promises to forgive when you confess. Oh, the weight and the burden of holding on to sins. David was just like, he couldn't sleep until he confessed his sins. But he says, blessed is the person whose sins are forgiven in Psalm 32, because it truly is. It's like a huge burden that finally gets lifted. Then you have the energy to please Him in other ways. But it starts with forgiveness and having a restored relationship. I think of the episode in John chapter 8 with the woman caught in adultery. She was surrounded by her accusers. Don't know how she got into adultery. Don't know if it was she was poor and she needed some way to make a living, or she was discontent with her marriage. I don't know. But at that point, what she was trying to hide was now exposed to all. And she was at Jesus' feet. And her accusers, the Pharisees, had stones in their hands ready to put her to death. And you think, well, those Pharisees are so mean. Old Testament law demanded that the adulterer be put to death. That was a righteous act. Believe it or not, that's shocking to us. Now, they had their own sins, and Jesus forgave her. how did he do that when the law demands death? Well, you know, don't you? A little while later, he put the sin of adultery and all the sins of the world upon him. He bore that sin on the cross for her so that she can be set free. She can be forgiven. All of the sin, the guilt, the shame, everything associated with it can be just lifted off of her. That's what the Savior can do. Those who were ready to stone her, what did he say to them? He who is without sin, cast the first stone. Because Jesus was also trying to tell them, like, well, the wages of sin is death. You might not have adultery, but you do have sin, and it demands the same thing. And so be careful that you're not high and mighty, even in this room. So you've kept yourself pure. But you've sinned in other ways. And so in a room like this, we cannot be self-righteous. We can't look down and scorn other people. We know that we're condemned as well as anybody else. And it's the Savior we have to look to. And he's the one that says, go and sin no more. I forgive you. You're forgiven. So why don't you bow your heads?